I'm going to talk about the prediction model library. So this is something that you'll see a lot of themes popping back up. So things that Jenna was talking about and things that Henrik was talking about. So what we're trying to do is reducing the risk of reproducing research wrong. So one of the things we'll say, so Henrik was just saying, if we're looking at specifically dementia models, then there's lots of these models been made, not that many have been validated, they're not really being used in clinical practice. And as Henrik just talked about, he's had some difficulties with either the models aren't sort of sufficiently reported or there isn't enough information. And so there's like technical difficulties that come in with validating it. And then also something we see from a lot of our modeling is that there's a infeasibility of applications, so the number of covariates are big. And I think this all sort of helps to contribute to a little bit of a lack of trust that we can see in modeling. And one thing I will say is that it's always more fun to get a new toy than to sort of fix or test out an old toy. And I think that's why we often see a lot of prediction models being made rather than being validated. So one of the questions is, how can we remove some of these barriers? So we have the OMOP CDM, which everyone in the OHDSI community will know and love. And I think that what we have really nicely now is, as Jenna was talking about, sort of the pipeline to create these models. And that removes a lot of sort of the technical barriers. But what that won't necessarily do is help with our trust. And although it increases the usability in the sense that of creating these models and validating these models, not necessarily in the sense of actually applying these models into clinical practice. And this is where I think a library containing all of the evidence that we create will add a lot of value. And one thing we hope to do is to also make it sort of very interactive so that you can go through and explore the evidence yourself. And it will remove the need, which at the moment is to go through sort of different RDS files in various GitHubs. So if I run a prediction study, I'll upload that to the GitHub, but then the results will be kept somewhere in there. And maybe I have a Shiny app with it, but then you'll need to go and find it and you'll need to search all of these through. And what it's nice is that we can create a central place to find all of this information. So a little bit of information about the prediction model library. So it will contain things like the model, the cohort, performance, and then sort of we'll add some metadata, so who developed it, what databases, what versions of different packages did they use, and this all sort of goes again to sort of creating a little bit more of a consistency and making sure we maintain that consistency. We're also going to be adding a DOI. So this is something that's quite nice in the sense that if we think of these prediction models as instead of being a model we develop today, and then we publish, and then we sort of leave. If we can start to think of these as being models that might need some updating, it's still then nice to be able to go back and say, okay, so when this paper was published, this is what the model was, this is what the evidence was, I want to be able to explore that. And then in the meantime, I want to be able to see all of the things that have been added to this. So it's nice that every step of the way we've created a pickle, basically, of the study. And the other thing that we're aiming to add is sort of lots of interactivity, so you can go through and play and explore it yourself. So now I'm going to give you a little live demo, if I can just switch. So you should now be able to see. So this is currently running online. So if the link here, you should be able to then explore it. I would ask that whilst I'm giving this presentation, not to go and log on to this because you'll probably knock me off the system. But basically, this is what we're going to have. So we'll have this nice landing page where we'll explain everything about the library and what its aims are. And then within the library, so currently this is set up using the COVID work that we did about a year ago now. So these are all the models that we ran from there. And then if you're familiar with the PLP Shiny app, then you'll probably recognize this page. But I'll say, hey, I'm interested in patients presenting with COVID symptoms and the hospitalization with pneumonia, and I want to predict this in 30 days. So if you think back to the slide Henrik showed where he's saying we need to have all this information, then a lot of this information sort of is covered by this bit. And we know that the index date will be clearly contained within the name. And then what happens is we have things like the development settings, which you can explore, and then a summary. So this has some performance. We'll then have information about the author and their contact details here, so you can easily get in contact with them if you're interested in their model. And you'll also be able to download the PLP object. So I'll discuss this a little bit later, but a quick snapshot is that we'll then basically give you the model and everything you need to validate it. We also have the discrimination. So this is what you see in our normal Shiny app. And so all this information is collated, and you can see the plots and you can scroll through them, and the same thing with calibration. But then what we've also added is a new tab for the validation. And so here currently this is the internal validation. So you can see that because development and validation database match. But what I can start doing is I can add in some more models, and I can say, well, how do these models compare? And so I can see, oh, well, actually my ROC goes down. I have the AUC here. We'll also be adding in lots of other metrics. So we've got lots of the calibration metrics, so the E50, the E90, the Emax. So they'll all start to come through as we develop this a little bit further. And then what you can also see is if we look here onto the calibration plot, we also get a highlighted yellow, and this is saying this is the range of probabilities over which we made predictions in the development database. And then you can then compare this to the different models that you've done. So currently we can see that all of the different models, their predictions exist well within that range. However, if I add MDCR here, so then we can see, okay, so now we're starting to see predictions that exist outside of this range. And so then that can be interesting and say, well, this is now a sort of extrapolation because we haven't got any information on this region in the development, and it allows you to bring all this information up, and it's a little bit presented in a little bit more of a centralized and coherent environment than we've had previously. And then you also get some information on the database type, the country, and a little information about some of the times that were contained within it. What we will also hope to do in the not too distant future is we want to add the ability to upload and download the models. So this is what I was saying when I was talking about getting the PLP object. So I think again, if I just go back to Henrik's presentation, he was saying that he had to so sometimes you'll get the cohorts defined, then you'll get the model, but sometimes they'll be missing the baseline risks, or you won't necessarily have some information on the covariates. But what we'll have is the ability, so you'll click on a model, you'll be able to explore the results, and then you'll be able to download everything you need to validate that study. So we'll create a little package. It's a bit like the validation package that we can create now, where you'll have the cohorts, the different settings, and the model itself. And so that will increase the ease with which that you can validate all these models. And so what we think this really adds is having this centralized version controls location for storing studies. And this is nice both for papers, so we can direct people here. If you're a prediction researcher and you want to find some models and you want to say, hey, I want to have some models to validate, or I have a new interesting algorithm that I want to explore, then you can go and say, well, look, I can see that these models all have data in a database that I'm familiar with, and I can see a sort of baseline performance, and now I can start to see how this compares. And we're also going to add the ability to upload your external validation. So you download the package, run it, and then re-upload it to the system, and then you can continue contributing to this ecosystem of evidence. Again, what I'd like to say is that we're going to have this focus on the accessibility and the usability of the database. So we want this to be not just for sort of prediction specialized researchers, but also clinicians or regulators can come here and they can get some more information about all the models, and they can feel a little bit more of ease of trawling through all of this data that we produce and the evidence that we produce. It's all going to be backed up by a database. I'm not going to go in the interest of time, I'm not going to go too detailed into this. However, this then means that we can sort of extract everything from the current formats we have and store it, and then we can make this database searchable, and maybe we can add an API to it, and then that'll allow people it's more about improving the ease with which people can access all of our research. And then with that, I will say, so you can contact me if you have any questions or suggestions or thoughts on this, then don't hesitate to email me. But otherwise, I'll hand back to you, Craig.